This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
So let's talk about a moment that honestly changed everything. Karl Marx getting kicked out of Paris. It was meant to shut him up, to silence this radical voice. But in a wild twist, it's the very thing that made his ideas last forever.
And that's the big question for today, isn't it? How on earth does forcing an activist into exile end up being the very thing that fuels his most famous work? It seems like a total paradox, but the answer tells us a lot about how history really works.
You know, we have this image of Marx being thrown out of Paris because his ideas were just too dangerous, right? That he was already this famous revolutionary shaking the world. But the reality in 1845, well, it was a lot less dramatic. He was basically just one name on a list of about 10 guys. They were all connected to a German newspaper that had said some nice things about an assassination attempt on the Prussian king. So for France, this wasn't some big ideological battle. It was just awkward. It was a diplomatic mess with Prussia, and Marx was basically collateral damage. He was just part of a political cleanup job.
So Marx has to pack his bags and move to Brussels. And this is where the story really gets interesting. This forced relocation becomes the quiet, unexpected setting for one of the biggest philosophical flips in modern history.
The Belgians told him he could stay, but there was one catch, and it was a big one. He had to promise no more political activity. Now, for an activist like Marx, that sounds like a total nightmare, but it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Since he couldn't be out there organizing or writing fiery articles, he was forced to turn inward. He had to think, to dig deeper, and to really build the rock-solid foundation for everything that came next.
And this is the absolute core of what he came up with. See, at the time, German philosophy was all about Hegel. The thinking was that ideas drive history. Our concepts of freedom, justice, spirit, those are the things that build the physical world around us. But in Brussels, Marx just completely flips that on its head. He says, no, you've got it backwards. It's not our ideas that create our reality. It's our material reality. You know, how we grow food, build houses, make stuff that shapes our ideas, our laws, our government, our whole culture.
And out of that huge reversal, we get his really specific take on the word ideology. For Marx, ideology isn't just your beliefs. It's a kind of upside-down thinking that makes our current economic setup feel totally natural, like it was always meant to be this way. It's the story a society tells itself about things like freedom or fairness to justify its own power structure, all while hiding the real economic gears turning underneath.
So in this new work he writes, The German Ideology, he pretty much calls out all the other big thinkers of his day. He's basically saying, look, you guys are all shadowboxing. You can't just criticize religion. You can't just debate other ideas. That's pointless, he says, because you're just arguing with the symptoms. If you really want to change the world, you have to stop fighting the shadows on the wall and go look at the economic engine that's casting them.
Okay, so this powerful new theory has been cooking in private while Marx was forced into silence. But now, it's about to get a very, very loud microphone. It's moving from the philosopher's study to the streets.
So picture this. It's 1847. There's this group in London called the Communist League. They're looking for a new direction. They're tired of all the vague, utopian dreaming. They want something concrete, something they call scientific. And they know exactly who to call. They reach out to Marx and ask him to write their new program. And just a few months later, in February 1848, the Communist Manifesto is published.
And this quote right here, this is exactly why they wanted him. Marx wasn't selling them some pie-in-the-sky ideal for the future. He was telling them that communism was a real movement, something that was already happening, a process being driven by the real-world conflicts of capitalism. It wasn't a dream you had to build, it was a force of history you had to recognize. For the League, this was it. This was the practical, scientific approach they've been searching for.
All right, so the manifesto is hot off the press in London. The theory is ready, the call to arms has been written. And then, history throws the biggest curveball imaginable. Just as Marx's text about revolution is released, a real revolution kicks off, and it's not his.
I mean, the timing is just incredible. In 1848, this huge wave of uprisings, the Spring of Nations, just explodes across Europe. Paris, Berlin, Vienna, it felt like the whole continent was on fire. But here's the thing, this wasn't the working-class proletarian revolution that Marx wrote about. Not at all. This was a bourgeois revolution, led by the middle class, your lawyers, your shopkeepers, people demanding constitutions and voting rights, not the overthrow of capitalism. And almost everywhere, they followed the same heartbreaking pattern. You'd have this first burst of success where it looked like things were really going to change, but then it all fell apart.
In France, it ends with a coup and another emperor. In Prussia and Austria, the old monarchies just waited for the revolutionaries to start fighting among themselves, and then they swooped in with the army and crushed them. The revolutions flared up, and then they just burned out.
Now, for pretty much any other thinker, this would have been devastating. Your big prediction just got completely overshadowed by real life. But for Marx, the failure of 1848 wasn't proof he was wrong. No, it was the ultimate real-world experiment. It was free data.
So Marx is watching all of this go down and he's taking notes. Why did it all fail? Well, he saw that the middle-class leaders got scared and made deals with the old aristocrats. He saw them turn against their working-class allies the moment things got dicey. But the biggest lesson? They tried to change the laws, but they never touched the real structures of power, the military, the state bureaucracy. It's like they tried to put a new driver in the car without ever bothering to check what was under the hood.
And all of this observation led him to one single, gigantic conclusion. The working class couldn't just be the junior partner in somebody else's revolution. He decided that the middle class would always sell them out to protect their own property. So if the working class, the proletariat, ever wanted to truly change things, they had to do it for themselves, by themselves. They needed their own independent movement. And that idea would shape everything he did for the rest of his life.
So I'll leave you with this final thought. Just think about it for a second. What if those revolutions in 1848 had actually worked? What if Europe had just smoothly become a collection of liberal democracies? Would we even be talking about Karl Marx today? He'd probably just be a footnote in some obscure philosophy book. It was precisely the failure of that historical moment that made his more radical critiques seem so urgent and so necessary. In the end, the history he got wrong is exactly what secured his place in history forever.
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.